2, 1, blast off. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, your weekly visit with two talking heads talking with you about the strategies, services, and success tips you need to make it big in managed services. I am Rich Freeman. I am Chief Content Officer at Channel Mastered, the company responsible for this podcast. I am joined this week, as I am every week, by your other co-host, my friend, my business partner, our chief strategist at Channel Mastered, Eric Simpson. Eric, how are you?
I'm doing well, Rich. Just in between shows. So DattoCon on the way to IT Nation Connect as we record this broadcast.
Absolutely.
Closing out the year, I know you've got more travel coming up beyond that, but I'm glad to think that I'm only doing one more travel stint, and I should be at home base through the holidays.
Which sounds nice. I go through this every year, by the way. So this is one of those very, very busy times of year on the event calendar, which is why, we're both kind of traveling a lot this time of year. And, we've been traveling a lot all year long. And so here we are at the end of that, and the holidays loom in the distance. We can kind of stay at home, enjoy friends, family, etc. And every year I look forward to that, and I'm ready for that. And then January, 3rd rolls around, and it's like, when can I get back out on the road? But first, I get to spend some time at home, and I'm looking forward to that, just like you are, Eric. Well, let's dive into our top story of the week here. And this is inspired by a story I wrote for Channelholic, my blog, recently. And the reason I kind of wanted to bring it up here, Eric, is shortly after that article appeared, I was talking with our Channel Mastered colleague and partner, Mark Kral. And like you, he is a recovering MSP. He was an MSP a long time ago in the early days of the model as we know it now, sold his business a long time ago. He said he read this piece that I had written and thought, man, I should maybe start another MSP again, because you've got me thinking it's a whole different world out there. And so what was it that got his attention like that? Well, back in the day when you were out in the business, you went out and you launched a managed services practice. You did your best to build it up. When you were ready for to kind of cash in on all of that hard work you did, really the only options that you had were to sell to a larger MSP, or maybe, and this is more true now than it was 20 years ago, but maybe you sell to one of the private equity firms out there that is so interested in buying and rolling up MSPs right now. But I mean, in the classic model, either way, what happens is you collect a check. There might be an earnout period when you're kind of sticking around for a little while, but you're kind of moving on and finding something else to do. A lot of people want that. That's what they're looking for. But I have been coming across more and more of these companies that are acquiring MSPs in a buy and hold kind of model. And so one of them that is going to be speaking at the IT Nation Connect event coming up soon is called Evergreen Services Group. I wrote about them earlier this year on Channelholic. Craig Fulton, well known from ConnectWise, is now part of the Evergreen team. And they don't, they're not looking to buy, roll up, and flip. They look for companies that they think are well run. They invest in those companies, and they are looking for owners who want to stick around and grow with the company, with help from Evergreen, with help from the other MSP owners in the Evergreen portfolio, and build something together. And that is very much true of this company that I wrote about recently for Channelholic called Workland Partners. And what's especially interesting about Workland, what got my attention, is most of the acquiring companies out there looking for MSPs right now are looking for larger ones. And, what I keep hearing from the experts is $1 million a year of EBITDA or better is kind of what everybody wants right now. And they've got a very different thesis at Workland. They're looking for much, much smaller companies, good companies, well-run companies with, sticky customer relationships and so on. But it is very much the buy and hold model, and the model where they hope, if you want to buy and exit, that's okay. They're good with that. But they are hoping that you're going to want to stick around and build something together with them and participate in the upside, as all of you are benefiting from shared expertise and the capital that they can infuse in your company without you having to give up your company, lose your brand, lose control, adopt somebody else's tool stack, etc. So, Workland Partners, interesting company. Evergreen, interesting company. There are others out there, some of which I've written about at Channelholic, and it just points out that the options available to you as an MSP, who, looking to capitalize the company, scale the company, maybe not exit, but just get to something bigger and better. There are more options out there than there used to be, and you don't have to give up everything that you've built to take advantage of those, Eric.
Yeah, and you couldn't be more on point, Rich. I mean, yes, when Mark and I, when we sold our respective practices, it was a completely different environment. I look at what's going on now, and I've spoken with the good folks at Evergreen. I know the folks at Workland and a few other PE firms. I think based on my experience, about 4 dozen M&A transactions on the buy and sell side for MSPs in the last 10 years or so, and a few vendors as well. And so, these equity investment firms are, and some of them are looking for very specific, large MSPs, and some are scrappy. And there's all these different. I mean, there's a few other ones that have really unique and interesting, strategies as well that have reached out to me, and I've had conversations with them about. But yes, I mean the options are much greater and better for MSPs at any size. Obviously, the better the EBITDA, the better the strike price that you'll be able to command is, and things like that. So not taking anything away from the core, fundamentals of valuation of a business, high EBITDA, and high multiples of different types of distributed revenue streams, low churn, low customer churn, low employee churn, good leadership, and all these things, right? That feed into this. But boy, oh boy, Rich, it is a different it's a different environment out there now. And I think that we saw a dip in transactions during COVID, and then we saw a little bit more of an uptick. And I think right now, we're still a little bit lower in terms of total transactions than we saw before COVID, but it's starting to pick up. But we may be kind of we're not quite where we were before. But some of these unique and distinct strategies that allow MSPs to kind of maintain their brand and image. This is not something that we've typically seen in the past for the firms that are really trying to create this giant roll up and then sell it as a package later. So it is unique, and I think that if you're an MSP out there, odds are you're probably getting hammered by folks asking you if you're interested in selling. I mean, I speak to MSPs all the time, like you do, Rich, and I hear that from everybody, and so everybody's out there just looking for these, for these folks. And I think Workland and others like them have found a unique opportunity that can attract and make a win-win for some of the smaller MSPs out there now as well.
Yeah, and you're right. The acquisition market, at least from the private equity side of things, is not back where it was before, and that's because interest rates are very high right now. Private equity firms rely on leverage when they're buying, and debt is just more expensive. Borrowing is more expensive for them right now, so they are much pickier. They're being more selective. That's why they're kind of looking for the $1 million in EBITDA and better, and they're doing more due diligence before they buy. But the good news is that there are options out there. You don't have to wait until you're $1 million EBITDA company to find somebody interested in investing in you. That, like you're saying, there are these companies out there like Workland and Evergreen and others that are actually looking for smaller companies that they can help grow to $1 million of EBITDA and do that together with you instead of in place of you. They want you to be a part of that. and that's a way for you to grow what you've already built and participate in the success of that. So it is nice for MSPs to have more options, and which one is going to make the most sense for you depends on who you are and where you are in your life and your career and retirement and your aspirations, etc. But having more options is always a good thing.
Absolutely.
So, Eric, let's get into your tip of the week here, and it's actually a timely topic in terms of some thinking and talking with people that I've been doing recently. But I will let you get into it, and I'll explain what I mean about that.
All right. I'm interested to hear that feedback. So, Rich, I know that listeners to previous podcasts that we've been on have heard me say this. Folks that have seen my webinars have heard me say this, and speaking engagements have heard me say this. And it's all about standardizing and building a basic minimum bundle of services that you require your clients to sign up for as an MSP in order to do business with you. No more of this, everybody's got a different agreement and we're going to swap in this solution for that solution and all this and try to make it work for a client's budget. We have to be smarter about this now. We want to make sure that our minimum bundle of services includes things that helps clients demonstrate compliance against their cyber liability insurance policies. I'm ringing that bell again because we know that claims are being kicked back and denied because of the failure of a business owner's ability to demonstrate compliance when they have a cyber incident, and they have to pay for their remediation out of their pocket. Typically, Rich, how do they fund that? They file a claim with their policy, and the policy says, "Oh yeah, you did all these things you were supposed to do. We're gonna go ahead and pay that claim." Or worse, well, I don't know, worse or better, but in some cases, the insurance carrier decides to pay the ransom because it would just make more sense. I mean, there are some situations where got you over a barrel and you've got to do what you got to do to get back in business as quickly as possible. And can you imagine, Rich, a carrier that you've been relying on to help you out at the moment when you need them the most to then deny a claim, and now you're stuck with not a lot of good options at that point. So as an MSP, I love the good, better, best way of bundling services. The higher the value, the higher the price, but more benefit and things like that. So good, better, best, but you're good. Or maybe you're an MSP that just sells one thing. Like I put together a portfolio of services and solutions, Rich, that I feel is the best thing for my clients. Well, great. But that has to be a standard that you then identify your internal costs, your third-party costs of all the subscriptions and other things that you're bundling into there. And then you're establishing your margin and you are selling it at that margin and sticking to it. And that's why I like good, better, best, because sometimes you can go up and down based upon a client's budget if you need to. But the point here, Rich, is to establish what that is, make sure that it aligns with the client's needs and their cyber liability insurance policies, 5 or 6 or 7 things that they're requiring in order to, approve a claim disbursement, funding, and go to market that way. And when we look at this, Rich, from that perspective, what we'll tend to find inside of an MSP's client list are legacy clients that they've had forever that are great clients. They're really not very noisy, maybe they are, but if they're not very noisy, but they're not meeting that minimum margin that you're establishing for your new clients that come aboard, what they're doing is they are stretching you thin on your ability to serve more clients. So this ties back into dealing with the tech shortage, dealing with the cost of hiring new technicians and things like that. So it's a larger conversation. When you establish your minimum bundle and your clients have to sign up for that at a minimum to be your client, then it forces you to look at the rest of your clients that aren't on that bundle and may not be delivering that margin. So you can try to true them up over time. But in my experience, Rich, working with lots and lots of MSPs, there are going to be some clients where a difficult decision needs to be made, where, boy, if I just release these 3 or 4 clients back to industry or help them find another home, maybe they're C customers, maybe they're noisy, boy, I might be able to bring on double that in new A clients at that margin. So again, it's a business conversation that you've got to have with yourself as a business owner, and you've got to hold yourself accountable. And not for nothing, Rich, but greater profit margins allows you to pay your staff better, to keep them from getting antsy when the headhunter calls in. You know what I mean?
So, yeah, I totally know what you mean. And I saw, in our show sheet for the episode, you're going to be talking about the minimum bundle and getting everyone on that. And by the way, totally endorse the idea that you do not want to be doing business long term, at least, with anyone who can't check off all of the items that the cyber liability insurance companies are requiring them to do. And you can use those requirements as a way to help these companies introduce services they may not be using now, but very much need if they want to be covered should a breach happen down the road. But this really sort of sparked my interest because I had the opportunity recently to interview Peter Kujawa, who runs Service Leadership, division of ConnectWise. People might remember it more in conjunction with the guy who created the company, Paul Dipple. Paul is retired these days. Peter replaced him. Super interesting guy. I'm always grateful whenever I get a chance to speak with him. And we were talking recently about the Q3 numbers from Service Leadership, which goes out every quarter and collects a lot of really good, deep, real-world business performance data from thousands and thousands of MSPs. And they found that in aggregate, MSPs worldwide grew in Q3 of 2023 by a double-digit number, but the variation in there was enormous. Top quartile MSPs grew by 25 to 30%. Bottom quartile MSPs lost money. And I mean all of them, Eric. Every last MSP in the bottom quartile, and a few of them in the medium quartiles, lost money in Q3. And I, of course, started quizzing Peter, well, what are the attributes that distinguish top quartile from bottom quartile? And one of the ones that he cited was that top quartile MSPs sell the overwhelming majority of their clients the best bundle on the good, better, best trio that you were talking about there. 70% of their clients, in fact, buy into what Service Leadership calls the full meal deal, the best of the 3 bundles available, whereas bottom quartile MSPs average about 52%. And you think 52, 70%, is that really that big a difference? It's an enormous difference for reasons that you were kind of hinting at in terms of the amount of money that you're bringing in, the amount of profit that you're generating from all of these hopefully high margin services that you're delivering, the way that allows you to recruit and retain employees and invest in the business and provide better service. So I would just encourage folks, by all means, get everybody on a minimum viable package of services that will keep them safe and insured, but get as many of those people as possible on the full meal deal, the best of your bundles as you can, if you really want to get up into that high growth quartile of MSPs out there and not get stuck in that money losing bottom quartile.
Great insight, Rich, and a good tag in, adding more emphasis on the importance of standardization and then building out good, better, best, because as your clients grow, instead of selling them the next version of that one software solution, you can say, look, it's time for you to get into our next package of services, and now your MRR goes up exponentially because you're moving 25, 30, 50, 100, 500 users to that next level.
Well, important food for thought, people. I hope you do think about this and how or what its implications are for your business. But we are ready to take a quick break right now and then be joined by John Tippett, Chief Operating Officer of Cytracom. He is also one of my go-tos, probably my number one go-to, quite frankly, on the topic of SMB networking, which is a somewhat neglected topic. So we're going to take a break. When we come back on the other side, John Tippett will join us, and we will talk a little bit about the state of the SMB networking market. And welcome back to part 2 of this episode of the MSP Chat Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our Spotlight interview. We are pleased and proud to be joined this week by John Tippett. He is the COO of Cytracom. Known him for a long time. John, for folks who are new to you, new to Cytracom, tell them a little bit about you and the company.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Glad to have known you for a long time as well. And a former MSP myself. I've been in the channel a long time. I've learned a lot from being here. Learned a lot from Eric as well when I was running my MSP, and just through the growth in my career, I moved over to the vendor side some time ago, developing solutions specifically for the managed services market. And my career journey took me through places like Datto and currently with Cytracom. And for those of you who don't know Cytracom was also founded by a couple of former MSPs with the initial product around voice and unified communications, developing something that was a gap in the market, but with a focus around engineering and product development for solutions for MSPs. And we've grown that product line. Initially, we're going to expand towards an SD-WAN product like the rest of the world was doing in communications, and leapt ahead into a full-blown SASE stack over the last couple of years that is Control One. So now a full offering of unified communications and a SASE platform available from Cytracom.
And that SASE platform and the work you did at Datto before that, there's sort of a networking through line to a lot of what you've been doing since exiting the MSP world. And as a result of that, you've been pretty much my go-to resource when I want to pick the brain of somebody who really understands SMB networking as opposed to networking in general. You're the guy I think of immediately. And in fact, you have a pretty strong point of view about what it is that SMBs and MSPs who serve them need in networking, and why it is that the really big names, big obvious names in the networking world don't really provide that. They've tried many times through the years. They never quite get it right. So kind of paint that picture for folks here. What is it that's different about an SMB network, and why can't the big networking companies ever quite land that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. And as you mentioned, we've talked about it over the years. And it is interesting hearing you say it back to me. I realize I do kind of have a chip on my shoulder, being a former MSP and dealing with this and managing the pressures of growing a small business myself, but also delivering outsourced IT services to SMBs themselves that need to stay connected, need to stay secured. And it just often feels like you're trying to take a square peg and jam it in a round hole. Looking at, MSPs, we can't build access points. We can't build edge solutions. We have to go find things that are available in the market and uniquely match that technology to the needs of the business we serve. That's the whole idea of managed services. And then, pay me a recurring service to deliver value and keep you up and running. And, there's a lot of nuances to why it's hard. One big thing that just permeates is we have a growing channel here. It's been really exciting over the last few years. The three of us have all talked about this, that, we've gone from 10, 15 years ago debating what exactly is managed services to billions of dollars in private equity investing and publicly traded companies that are in our space. And it's been super exciting. But all that said, we are a tiny dot in the grand scheme of a lot of these large companies. And that's a big deal. These companies that sell into the government, enterprise, international business tend to overlook the unique needs of the managed services market. And it creates a lot of pain for MSPs. You have to compete with them directly. You've got to sell commodity products. The licensing models are challenging because they just weren't built to be multi-tenancy and delivered as a service. And combine that with all the things we've seen over the last couple of years. The workforce is distributed now. People work outside of a corporate headquarters. We're no longer securing the building and the people who are in the building and occasionally having a remote worker. We've moved to where people are all over the place. And at the same time, people went everywhere. So did all the data. everything moved to the cloud and line of business applications. And there's no server running 5 applications. It's 5 different vendors with 5 different cloud platforms. And it's created a real challenge for MSPs to keep all the people connected, connect them at the identity level. Like, I need people individually secured, and I need to do that to keep up with the security requirements. And yet when I look at the choices that the large, big providers are delivering, it's the same stuff. It's a box that's put together with a processor and licensing, and I need to buy a thing and pick a model, and it gets depreciated. The models change. It's just not working, but it works really well in these, government, enterprise, big business things. And so there's a conflict in the channel where there's a lot of dollars, and they don't make sense, but they make dollars going to the enterprise side. And if you're in the MSP space, you need to acquire it differently, sell it differently, and the challenges are unique. And I think, to your point, over time, we've just seen these different things come together. That's sort of a recipe for a perfect storm in our channel, that a lot of demands on MSPs to solve the problem. People are compromising people now, not hacking firewalls. You're phishing and tricking a human, and we weren't putting like ads and malware on the machine nowadays. You're getting ransomware. And with all these things happening, the MSP is in demand, but there's a mismatch in, how to get to solve it. And I think that's kind of the genesis of the conversations we've had. Is I've personally been caught in that, and am happy and proud to be on the side of delivering solutions and pushing for innovation to help.
Yeah, this is this interview is timed right after we all attended and saw each other, John, at DattoCom last week. So the timing for our segment is pretty amazing, getting it, put together this quickly. Now, while we were at DattoCom last week, we heard from a bunch of different Kaseya executives talking about their high hopes for Datto's networking portfolio, which you used to run before joining Cytracom. And as you mentioned, the needs of today's buyers have changed, and the needs of today's MSPs have changed to try to keep up with this migration to the cloud, this enhanced cybersecurity requirement, this hybrid workforce support, not only for a client's end customers, but also for an MSP's staff as well. So with all of these changing needs and requirements, how big of an opportunity is traditional networking for the SMB market and for SMB partners today, from your perspective?
I think there's 2 sides when we talk about networking. There's the connectivity itself. You need infrastructure for the foreseeable future. If you zoom out of the MSP channel, you see all the hype and debate, the channel partners events, and 5G is changing. Everything is going to be a point connection. Rich, you've written about these things as well, and everybody's kind of watching. It's not there. Like, there's not a world to where every single user and their device independently reaches the WAN. So there's still, for the foreseeable future, a demand around the infrastructure, physical switches, wireless access points. Even when you work at home, you're still connecting to hardware and devices. And there's, it's a red ocean of options there. Lots of good manufacturers, lots of standards. Incidentally, a lot of the physical manufacturing of switches and access points goes back to 2 or maybe 3 manufacturers total that do all the work at the core of it. The challenge has mostly become around the edge and the implementation of security, and getting security and cloud access delivered down to the individual user basis. And that is the other side of networking. That is where there's a ton of innovation, and it's a nice thing for us. That it's, capitalistic view. There's dollars being spent. There's pent up demand. There's big manufacturers that aren't delivering things that meet the MSP space. So that's fueling innovation. And, companies like ours at Cytracom are capitalizing and saying, we're going to help, we're going to fix that, we're going to do something here and help. And that's where the SASE concept is coming together. It is alive and moving in the enterprise as well. There are providers who are doing it in the enterprise. The challenge with an enterprise SASE solution is the same story. It's sold direct. It's very complicated to manage. It doesn't work in a multi-tenancy environment. And a lot of other options in the channel have tried to bring pieces and parts, and they take a product and put a sales team in front of it, and you get a software agent that doesn't have hardware, or you get more of a VPN aggregation concept. Not to get too technical, but that brings its own challenges with shared IPs and IP reputation. I mean, to have a true SASE solution that built for MSPs, we obviously feel like that's an enormous opportunity, and that's where we're focusing on. So I think, the Datto switches, access points, is a solid product. There's a lot of choices out there. When you start to push the edge connectivity and connecting remote workers, I think that's where the secret sauce is. And I think that's where the innovators and the fast movers will win. And it takes a lot of focus and a lot of expertise to pull that off and get it right.
Yeah, I mean, I liked how you framed it up. It's kind of, that edge is the new frontier, and how do we deliver cloud and connectivity to end devices securely? So, would you say that these are basic table stakes? Is SASE now a basic table stake? And what other attributes does an SMB networking solution need to have, from your perspective, John, to meet the needs of today's MSPs and their customers now and moving into the future?
Yeah, I think SASE for sure as a category is where the magic is going to be. The interesting thing about it is SASE today it has the benefit that it's been defined academically. In the Gartners of the world, they have the all respect, they have the privilege of explaining this is what should happen. They don't build it or make it happen. So the concept of SASE is amazing. Like, it's the answer. The trick is going to be, as they say, the proof in the pudding. We need to make pudding, but we haven't done it yet as a broad industry. And I think that's where you're going to see strong innovation. So to your point about, is SASE the next thing? Absolutely. You'll see it in the enterprise coming down. You'll see it in the MSP space going up. It is the next generation right way to think about connectivity. Our traditional networking solutions are hardware centric. The edge is a physical thing. It is a box that is sitting in a closet. When you connect different businesses' locations together, you're doing it in a site to site location. When you think about how do I connect to Azure, is it 5 connections or 1? And now I've got a remote user. Where do I terminate that back to? All these discussions are happening by MSPs, not because that's the desired way to do it. It's, without SASE, the only way to do it. And it brings in all sorts of headaches. When you look at a SASE model, the concept is that the traditional edge is gone, and that the point of ingress and egress exists in the cloud, where it should be. That's where everything's happening. That's where you come and go from the trusted network, but that the security and the access is taking place at the user. A traditional network, those things happen at the edge, and the edge is a box in a closet. So SASE basically breaks that to say the point of ingress egress is at the cloud, but the control is down to the user. So you get a secure access service edge. That's the acronym. And that concept is very sound. Execution is where the magic is. Can you actually pull that off? It takes software, it takes hardware, it takes an understanding of security and routing and connecting all these things together. And that's where the fun is, as well as, building and innovating in that space.
So speaking of that, let's talk about execution, because your implementation of SASE at Cytracom is the Control One platform that you referenced a little bit earlier on there. I've actually been covering that, writing about that literally since it first shipped. Tell folks a little bit about what Control One is and what it does.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the neutrality of this as well. I'm excited to talk about Control One, but the concept and the discussion about SASE it's where the discussion needs to go. MSPs need to keep pushing. Hopefully you do business with us. We're proud to be innovating. There will be other choices, but we're glad to create those choices and push this forward. What we have done with the Control One platform is start with the MSP. That is the center of all of the conversations, and looked at the definition of SASE as it relates to how an MSP will consume it, deploy it, and manage it. And everything we've done builds from that. So you have a combination of software and hardware that's put together in a solution that lets you not have to use any other third party for the connectivity portion. Some other solutions in the market tell you, well, we'll connect with software, but you need to go buy another firewall. And again, it's a lack of understanding of MSPs. If I'm an MSP, I don't want to manage 2 or 3 different places where security exists. I want to have all of my access control of my network and security in one place. It's the only thing that makes sense. So we've delivered that in a full-blown SASE solution with integrated SD-WAN, a zero trust network architecture, and a platform that's super easy for an MSP to use. Our principle of developing the user interface was that a tier 1 network engineer can execute changes. Like, these 5 people at headquarters need to communicate with these 5 people at the remote office. Doing something like that in Control 1 takes seconds, which would take expensive salary certifications and hours with a traditional network, with VLANs and all sort of complicated things. So we've built all that and put it together where it's delivered only through the channel, and it's delivered in a month-to-month as a service model. So it's very easy. There's no bundling of licensing and minimums and complexities. An MSP can sign a client, deploy Control 1, one-to-one to the managed users and sites, and then ramp it up, ramp it down, turn it off however they need to. And that's been the principle of what we've put together. Everything in one place, easily delivered as a managed service.
So John, you and I are recovering MSPs, right? And we're a special breed, right? Sometimes it takes a little bit of convincing to get MSPs to adjust their view of how to approach something new and introduce it to their clients. So the 3 of us have talked in the past about the right way and the wrong way to sell Control 1 and solutions like it. What are your thoughts about how to position, what will get the light bulb to go off in the mind of an MSP that says, holy cow, this is the direction that I need to move in? What is that, what is that message that can resonate with an MSP to say, this is where my clients are going, this is where the industry is moving, this is where technology and security are moving. I need to look at adopting a solution like this and promoting it to my existing clients to provide them the peace of mind and myself the peace of mind that I'm doing the best job in securing their connectivity for their users.
Yeah, it's a lot around helping educate. And what I mean by that is not that MSPs are uneducated. MSPs are very intelligent, entrepreneurial people by nature, and you spend time solving problems. MSPs lack the free time to go look and find new and better ways. As your business is successful and you're growing, you're reacting. The phone's ringing. You did a good job. You got a referral. There's a staff that's leaving. Something went wrong. I mean, you're in the business. You've talked about this too, and the notion of work on the business and zoom out is a hard concept for MSPs, just like any entrepreneur. And so one of the things we're focusing on is bringing information to them. And we're doing that from 2 directions. First is to the MSP themselves. When you're selling a traditional networking solution, there are pain points that MSPs have to deal with. You're, for example, quoting a third-party brand. That, we talked about this before too with services. You want everything included as possible. You don't want them talking about any vendors. You want to be the decision maker in everything you possibly can, and you want to earn that recurring revenue. Conversations that you have to have where you are bringing up renewals, licenses, and talking about commodity products is detrimental to your own individual brand. And so we are educating about how to sell as a service, how to bundle things, and look at the pain points you have. You're selling a commodity product today. You have to manage these remote connectivities that are required, remote users, multiple sites. You're trying to make sure that you give tight security, but you're doing that in a way with traditional networking that's difficult. You cannot create microsegmentation. You cannot stop a third-party device from joining the network. If a user knows the password and they went to Best Buy to get a laptop, they can get on the network. There's no zero trust concept in a traditional network. And there's a whole category of problems that MSPs face. On the other side of that is the market demands that are being put on the small businesses. Cyber insurance is getting hit hard by these malicious actors, the ransomware. The cyber policies are paying the bill. And so they're starting to create rules and requirements and impose those on businesses. All laptops need to have encrypted hard drives. You must keep certain operating systems out of the network. Current operating systems must be patched, etc. This is coming from the insurance companies. That was a foreign concept 5 years ago. And then on top of that, you've got GRC that's coming along with things like CMMC. These demands are coming on the business. Insurance companies bring them up. If you're in the supply chain of the government, you're getting into CMMC. Now, private industry is saying, well, if it's good enough for the government, we'll follow it too. And the MSP has to respond to that demand. So what we're focusing on is educating about the dynamic in the market and the opportunities that are available, and then showing how a SASE approach meets the needs of your customer and avoids these gaps that you have as an MSP. So you're able to meet those needs, reduce risk yourself, and ultimately then you can charge a higher value because you're delivering things that you cannot do with a traditional network. You cannot deliver that type of compliance using traditional tools.
Well, John, always a pleasure talking with you about this topic. I really appreciate you making some time for us. Before we move on, tell folks a little bit if they want to follow up with you, learn more about Cytracom, Control One, where should they go?
Yeah, the easiest thing, you can reach out to any of us. We're all happy to chat with you. We're available on LinkedIn. You can link us, reach out, shoot us an email. But you can also just go to Cytracom.com. Both are, we're talking about Control One here. Unified Communications is there as well. If you're not a partner, you can become a partner very easily. We're happy to have MSPs on board with us. And there's lots of educational content there as well. And you can book a demo where we'll get on one-on-one and show the product to you and look at your market, your challenges, and show you how we can line up to help you capture more market share and secure your clients and reduce complexity out of your networking stack.
Sounds great. John, again, thank you very much. Folks, we are going to take a break now. When we come back on the other side, Eric and I are going to talk a little bit about SMB networking and maybe have a few laughs and wrap up the show. So stick around. We will be right back. All right, and welcome back to part 3, the final part of this episode of the MSP Chat Podcast. Always a pleasure, truly for me, always a pleasure, Eric, to speak with John Tippett. First, because he is a gentleman's gentleman, and I'm struck by that every time I run into him out on the road, and there is no one who is always, more kind and gracious, honestly, than John Tippett out there. But also, he's just been immersed in the world of SMB networking for such a long time that he really does understand how SMB networking differs from enterprise networking, different from the kind of networking that, the Ciscos of the world have been doing for a long, long time. There are differences. And it was, I won't get into the details, but it was something that Kaseya was talking about at DattoCon recently, that there's a huge opportunity out there for a vendor and for MSP partners of that vendor in SMB networking. And you really get a feel for that anytime you talk to John.
Yeah, and boy, Rich, you picked just the right moniker. I mean, a gentleman's gentleman. That is so apropos for John, and he's such a knowledgeable individual in the things that he focuses on, and it just comes through and in these interviews with him, and just in casual conversation, like you say, when we run into him at events and things like that. So it's really a pleasure to have him on the show.
Well, folks, that leaves us with time for just one last thing on this episode of the MSP Chat Podcast. And actually, it's going to be 2 short last things, both of which come to us from the state of North Carolina, and both of which concern the lottery there. Because for some reason or other, Eric, it seems like they're just churning out oddball lottery stories in North Carolina recently. And so one that I kind of got a kick out of concerned a winner of the North Carolina lottery who won $266,982. He was quite naturally thrilled about that and called his mom up to let her know about his good fortune. And it took him a long, long time to convince her that he had actually won, because he is famous in this family for tricks and tomfoolery,
Shenanigans.
shenanigans, let's say. So when he calls you up and say, "Hey, I just won $267,000 in the lottery," you figure, okay, you're putting me on again. And gosh darn it, he wasn't this time. And eventually he was able to convince everybody he'd actually won. Then there's this other one, which I enjoy even quite a bit more. And I just kind of have to read the wire service coverage of this, because they wrote it up as if this makes sense, and it really kind of doesn't, Eric. So the story says a North Carolina man said an itchy left hand led to his winning a $100,000 prize from a scratch-off lottery ticket. Brian Hicks of Stovall told lottery officials his left hand was itching, so he decided to visit Rosemart on North Garnett Street in Henderson to buy a lottery ticket. My left hand started itching. It was like telling me to stop. Was it really, Eric? I mean, when you're in the car and your left hand, let's say, starts itching, is that a signal to you to maybe pull over and buy a lottery ticket? I don't know. I read this and just thought, good for him. He, I guess he read that sign correctly, because he's $100,000 wealthier than he used to be. But I just can't follow the logic.
Yeah, different aches and pains. I'm gonna start paying more attention to what my body's telling me, Rich. Maybe I'll win some money.
And it could be a lot of money. It could. Now I know what to do the next time my left hand itches. Just who'd have guessed? Well, folks, that is all the time we've got this week on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be back again next week. Until then, if you want to watch this episode, other episodes in video, you can find us on YouTube. The audio-only version of this podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Google or Apple or Spotify or Stitcher or Amazon Music, you name it. You'll find us there. When you do, please subscribe, rate, review, share, help the rest of the world find and enjoy this show just like you do. The producer of this show is our good buddy Russ Johns. He is part of the Channel Master team here. You can learn more about him at russjohns.com. You can learn more about Channel Mastered at www.channelmastered.com. And last but not least, you can learn more about my blog, Channelholic, which we have talked about a little bit here, at channelholic.news. So once again, folks, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to see you again in another week. Until then, please remember, you can't spell channel without MSP.